In the brutal skies over Europe during World War II, where life hung by the thread of a propeller's spin, miracles weren't just hoped for, they happened. But none quite like the day one American fighter pilot and his rugged Republic P-47 Thunderbolt defied death itself. 21 cannon shells from a German Focke-Wulf ripped through his plane, shredding metal and hydraulics, while over 200 machine gun bullets peppered its skin like lethal hail. Yet, against all odds, that bird flew on, carrying its wounded pilot home.
This is the story of Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson and the miracle that humbled the Luftwaffe, a testament to American engineering, sheer grit, and perhaps a dash of fate.
How did one Thunderbolt survive what should have been certain destruction? Let's dive into the chaos of 1943, where the air war turned savage. The year was 1943, and the Allied bombing campaign over Nazi-occupied Europe was ramping up. From bases in England, the U.S. 8th Air Force launched daring raids deep into enemy territory, pounding factories, rail yards and airfields to cripple Hitler's war machine. But the bombers, those lumbering B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, were sitting ducks without fighter escorts. Early on, the P-51 Mustangs weren't yet in full swing with their long-range drop tanks, so the burden fell on the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, affectionately dubbed the Jug by its pilots for its jug-like fuselage. This beast of a plane wasn't sleek or nimble like a Spitfire, it was a tank with wings. Powered by a massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp radial engine churning out over 2,000 horsepower, the P-47 could dive like a demon, absorb punishment that would splinter lesser aircraft, and pack 8.50 caliber machine guns that could shred anything in its path. According to declassified Army Air Forces reports, the Thunderbolt's self-sealing fuel tanks and armored cockpit saved countless lives, turning potential fireballs into survivable wrecks. Enter Robert Samuel Johnson, a 23-year-old from Lawton, Oklahoma, a kid who grew up hunting, boxing, and dreaming of the skies. Born on February 21, 1920, Johnson was no stranger to tough scrapes. He earned an engineering degree from Cameron Junior College and snagged his private pilot's license through the Civilian Pilot Training Program in 1939. When war called, he joined the U.S. Army Air Forces as an aviation cadet in the summer of 1941, earning his wings by July 1942. Assigned to the 56th Fighter Group, known as Zemke's Wolf Pack under the legendary Colonel Hubert Zemke, Johnson shipped out to England in January 1943. The 56th was the first P-47 outfit in the European theater, and they were green, eager but untested against the battle-hardened Luftwaffe. Life at their base in Halesworth, Suffolk, was a grind of mud, missions and mortality. Pilots like Johnson flew ramrod operations, escorting bombers to targets and back, or rodeos, sweeping for enemy fighters. The Germans, with their Focke-Wulf FW-190s and Messerschmitt Bf-109s, were masters of the ambush, using the sun and clouds for cover. Jägerschwader II, JG2, the Richthofen wing, patrolled the Channel coast like wolves, led by aces like Major Egon Mayer, who pioneered head-on attacks against bombers. Mayer, with over 100 victories by war's end, was a formidable foe, cool, calculated, and deadly. Johnson, flying with the 61st Fighter Squadron, racked up his first kills in the spring of '43, but June 26 would test him like no other day. That morning, the Wolfpack lifted off for a routine escort over France, part of a larger raid on airfields near Paris. The sky was a patchwork of cumulus clouds, perfect for hiding hunters. Johnson's Thunderbolt, serial number 41 to 6235, hummed steadily at the rear of the formation, a position that made him the tail-end Charlie, the most vulnerable spot. As they crossed the French coast near Dieppe, the radio crackled with tension.
"Bogies at 3 o'clock high," someone shouted.
16 FW-190s from JG2 screamed down from the sun, guns blazing. What happened next would etch Johnson's name into aviation lore. The first pass shattered the formation. Cannon fire erupted, and Johnson's plane lurched as 20mm shells slammed home. Hydraulic fluid sprayed like blood, the canopy cracked under the barrage, and shrapnel tore into his leg. A machine gun bullet grazed his nose, drawing a thin line of crimson. His controls went sluggish, the engine coughing smoke.
Trapped in a crippled jug, Johnson spun downward, flames licking the cockpit.
But the P-47 held, its rugged frame refusing to quit. The German pilot, perhaps Mayer himself, circled back for the kill, unleashing burst after burst. Meanwhile, across the channel, ground crews waited anxiously, unaware that one of their own was about to pull off the impossible. The sky above northern France erupted in violence.
16 Focke-Wulf FW-190 Jagdgeschwader 26, the infamous Abbeville boys, plunged from out of the sun, cannons barking. The 56th Fighter Group, S-formation shattered in seconds.
5 Thunderbolts went down almost instantly, torn apart by the veteran German pilots who knew exactly where to aim. Robert Johnson, flying tail-end Charlie in his P-47C named Half Pint, never had a chance to maneuver. 21 20mm cannon shells slammed into his fuselage like hammer blows from hell. The hydraulic lines burst, spraying red fluid across his face and blinding him. The canopy exploded into 1,000 shards, one slicing into his leg. A machine gun round grazed the tip of his nose, drawing a thin line of blood.
Flames licked up from the cockpit floor. The big radial engine coughed black smoke.
The controls went dead in his hands. The jug rolled onto its back and spun earthward, a burning corkscrew of metal and fire. Johnson's first instinct was pure survival: get out. He yanked the canopy release. Nothing. The shell that exploded behind his headrest had jammed it solid, trapping him inside a furnace. He clawed at the edges, burning his hands, but the plexiglass wouldn't budge. The altimeter unwound wildly. 15,000 feet.
12,000.
8,000. The world spun in a blur of cloud and flame.
This is it, he thought.
I'm going to die in this cockpit. But the Thunderbolt refused to let him go. That massive Pratt & Whitney R2800, the heart of the jug, kept turning even as oil and coolant sprayed everywhere. The self-sealing fuel tanks held. The armored cockpit floor absorbed shrapnel that would have gutted a lesser plane. Slowly, agonizingly, Johnson kicked full left rudder and hauled back on the stick. The spin slowed, hesitated, then broke. At barely 2,000 feet, the jug leveled out, trailing smoke but still flying.
He was alive.
Barely. Blood ran from his nose and leg. Hydraulic fluid stung his eyes. The cockpit reeked of burning oil and scorched metal. Instruments were shattered, the throttle quadrant mangled. But the engine still thundered.
Johnson nursed the crippled fighter toward the coast, every second an eternity.
He knew he had to get over the channel. Crash landing in occupied France meant capture or worse. Yet the jug was dying around him. No flaps, no brakes, no hydraulics. The propeller blades were holed in 5 places. Over 200 bullet holes peppered the airframe. He'd stop counting later, stunned by the sheer number. Then, out of the haze, a new shadow appeared. A single FW-190 slid up behind him, sleek and deadly. The German pilot, possibly Major Egon Mayer himself, the rising star of JG-2, who pioneered head-on attacks and would soon claim over 100 victories, had spotted the limping American.
He closed in, confident.
This should be easy, one burst to finish the job. But as the FW-190 opened fire, something extraordinary happened. Cannon shells hammered the jug again, ripping through fuselage, wings, tail. The armor plate behind Johnson took 15 direct hits. Yet the Thunderbolt kept flying. The German made pass after pass, pouring ammunition into the American fighter. Johnson could do nothing but fly straight and pray. His guns were useless. His plane was a sitting duck. The FW-190 pilot kept coming. He rocked his wings, almost in disbelief, as if studying the impossible. Then he pulled up close alongside, looked Johnson in the eye through the shattered canopy, and saluted.
A crisp, respectful gesture. Out of ammunition, the German peeled away, vanishing into the clouds.
Johnson later recalled the moment in his memoir. He looked me over, shook his head, and flew off. I'll never forget that salute. It was a rare moment of chivalry in a merciless war, a Luftwaffe ace acknowledging that this American plane simply would not die. Johnson turned north, coaxing every ounce of power from the wounded engine. The channel loomed ahead, gray and cold.
Fuel was low.
Oil pressure dropping. But the jug held together, mile after grueling mile. Ground crews at RAF Manston near Dover watched in astonishment as a smoking riddled Thunderbolt appeared low over the water, wheels up, no flaps. Johnson bellied it in, sliding across the grass, ground looping to a halt between 2 parked Hawker Typhoons. The plane finally stopped. Silence. Then he kicked the jammed canopy open, climbed out, and kissed the ground. When the mechanics walked around Half-Pint, they counted the damage in stunned silence: 21 20mm cannon hits, over 200 machine gun strikes, 5 holes in the propeller. The fuselage looked like Swiss cheese. Yet the Thunderbolt had brought its pilot home. Word spread like wildfire through the 8th Air Force. The jug could take a beating no other fighter could survive. German pilots began to whisper about the indestructible American fighter. Luftwaffe ace Heinrich Bahr would later admit, the P-47 could absorb an astounding amount of lead and had to be handled very carefully. For Robert Johnson, that day changed everything. The kid from Oklahoma had stared death in the face and walked away. The miracle wasn't just the plane, it was the man who refused to give up, and the machine built tough enough to match his will. But the war wasn't over. Johnson would climb back into another Thunderbolt, determined to settle the score. And the skies over Europe would never be the same.
RAF Manston, late afternoon, June 26, 1943.
The sun hung low over the Kent countryside as ground crews heard the unmistakable cough of a wounded radial engine approaching from the south. Heads turned skyward. A single Thunderbolt limped in low over the channel, smoke streaming from its cowling, no gear down, no flaps. It was a ghost plane, ragged holes gaping along the fuselage, tail surfaces shredded, yet somehow still airborne. The pilot bellied it in on the grass runway, the jug sliding in a shower of dirt and sparks, ground looping wildly before coming to rest between two parked Hawker Typhoons. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the cockpit hatch popped open with a metallic groan. Out climbed Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson, bloodied, burned, but very much alive. He dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead to the earth, breathing in the smell of crushed grass and hot metal. Medics rushed forward, but Johnson waved them off long enough to stand and pat the side of his plane, as if thanking an old friend. Mechanics gathered around, tools in hand, staring in disbelief. They counted methodically, 21 clean penetrations from 20mm cannon shells, most through the fuselage and wings, several smashing into the armored cockpit bulkhead behind his seat. The armor plate alone had taken at least 15 direct hits, dented and cracked but never breached. Over 200.30 caliber equivalent machine gun strikes dotted the airframe. Johnson himself stopped counting bullet holes at around 100 when he inspected it later. 5 propeller blades were holed, the hydraulic system completely shot out, oil lines severed, coolant leaking. The self-sealing tanks had done their job. No catastrophic fire despite the flames that had licked the cockpit floor. The big R-2800 engine, though wounded, had kept turning just long enough to get him home. According to Johnson's own account in his post-war memoir Thunderbolt, and corroborated by 8th Air Force reports, the plane, serial 41 to 6235, coded HVP and nicknamed Half Pint, was beyond salvage. Too much structural damage, too many irreplaceable parts compromised. It was scrapped right there on the field, little more than a testament pulled from the scrap heap.
But its story lived on.
Word raced through the 56th Fighter Group like wildfire. Tail End Charlie had taken everything the Luftwaffe could throw and walked away. Pilots clustered around the wreck, shaking their heads, slapping backs. "That jug just wouldn't quit," one said. Another muttered, "If that don't prove she's the toughest bird in the sky, nothing will." Back at Halesworth, Colonel Hubert Zemke, Zemke's Wolf Pack, listened to Johnson's debrief with quiet intensity. The group had lost several planes that day. The ambush by JG-20 SIXS FW-190s had been brutal and well executed. But Johnson's survival shifted something in the air. The P-47, once mocked by some as a milk bottle or flying milk wagon for its bulky shape, earned new respect.
German pilots, too, took note.
Rumors filtered back through intelligence channels. Luftwaffe flyers spoke of an American fighter that absorbed punishment no Messerschmitt or Focke-Wulf could match. One ace, possibly Egon Mayer, though never definitively confirmed, had poured ammunition into it until his guns ran dry, then saluted and departed, as if conceding defeat to the machine itself. Heinrich Bahr, another high-scoring German, would later remark that the Thunderbolt could absorb an astounding amount of lead and had to be handled very carefully. The myth of the indestructible jug began to spread, boosting morale at a time when the 8th Air Force needed every edge. For Johnson, recovery was swift but not without scars. Shrapnel in his leg, burns on his hands from clawing at the jammed canopy, a grazed nose that left a thin scar he carried the rest of his life. He spent a short time in hospital, then insisted on returning to ops. The experience hadn't broken him, it had forged him. He flew with renewed fire, determined to pay back the Luftwaffe in kind. Over the next 11 months, he would rack up 27 confirmed aerial victories, all fighters, all in the Thunderbolt, making him the second highest scoring American ace in the European theater behind only Francis Gabby Gay-Bresky of the same group. His tally included multiple FW-190s and BF-109s. He became a master of the high-speed dive and zoom tactics the P-47 excelled at.
The miracle of June 26 rippled outward. It reinforced Republic Aviation's design philosophy: build 'em big, build 'em tough.
The Thunderbolt's radial engine could take hits that would seize an inline like the Mustangs. Its armor and redundancy gave pilots a fighting chance where others had none. By late 1943, as long-range P-51s began arriving, the jug shifted roles: ground attack, strafing runs over Normandy beaches, tank busting in the Battle of the Bulge, but its legend as the plane that wouldn't die endured.
Robert Johnson never forgot that day.
In interviews years later, he spoke not of luck, but of engineering and will. "The P-47 gave me a chance," he said. "I just had to take it." And take it he did, through fire, through lead, through the cold certainty of death.
One man, one machine, against impassable odds. Yet the air war raged on.
Johnson would climb back into the cockpit, guns loaded, eyes sharp. The Luftwaffe still ruled the skies in places, but the balance was shifting. And the Thunderbolt had just shown them how fragile that rule could be. The miracle over France on June 26, 1943, wasn't just a one-off escape, it became the spark that lit a fire in the 56th Fighter Group.
Robert Johnson healed fast, the burns fading, the shrapnel scars turning silver under his flight suit.
5 days later, he was back in the cockpit, climbing into a fresh Thunderbolt with the same determined grin. The Wolf Pack watched him go, and something shifted. That rugged Jug, the plane they'd once called a flying milk bottle, was now the unbreakable shield they all trusted. Tales of the indestructible P-47 spread through every squadron in the 8th Air Force, lifting spirits when losses were heavy and the Channel crossing felt like a gauntlet.
Johnson flew with vengeance and precision.
From July 1943 onward, he hunted the skies like the wolves they were named for. He became an ace in October, downing one of the Luftwaffe's top commanders, Oberstleutnant Hans Philipp, in a swirling dogfight over the North Sea. Victories piled up, FW-190s in blazing dives, Bf-109s caught flat-footed at altitude. By early 1944, he was the leading American scorer in Europe, surpassing even Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26. His final tally settled at 27 confirmed kills, all in the Thunderbolt, all hard-won in the brutal air battles over Germany. He flew 91 combat missions in total, each one a testament to the man and the machine that refused to break. On May 8, 1944, Johnson scored his 26th and 27th, a Bf-109G and an FW-190, over Celle, Germany. That was his last sortie. With his tour complete and the invasion of Normandy just weeks away, he boarded a transport home on June 6, 1944, the very day the Allies stormed the beaches. He arrived to a hero's welcome, parades, handshakes from President Roosevelt, war bond rallies where crowds cheered the kid from Oklahoma who'd stared down death and won.
The Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross clusters, and the RAF Distinguished Flying Cross adorn his chest.
But more than medals, he carried the quiet knowledge that he'd helped turn the tide. The war ended in victory, and Johnson stepped into peacetime with the same steady hand. He stayed in the Air Force Reserve, rising to lieutenant colonel, but his real post-war chapter unfolded at Republic Aviation, the very company that built his beloved Jug. As chief test pilot and later an engineering executive for 18 years, he helped refine fighters for a new era, testing jets and pushing boundaries just as he'd pushed his Thunderbolt beyond its limits. He served as national president of the Air Force Association, spoke at bases in Korea during the conflict there, and never stopped flying in spirit. Later, he moved into insurance in South Carolina, built a life with family, and wrote his memoir, Thunderbolt, a gripping, honest account that became a classic among aviation enthusiasts. He remained a sought-after speaker, warm, humble, always crediting the plane, the ground crews, and the sheer will of the men around him. Robert Samuel Johnson lived a full, rich life until December 27, 1998, passing at 78 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, surrounded by loved ones. He left behind a legacy not just of kills or survival, but of unbreakable resilience. The P-47 Thunderbolt proved it could take punishment and keep flying. Bob Johnson proved a determined pilot could do the same with his own life. In the end, that single battered Jug didn't just beat the odds on one terrible day, it helped win the air war, inspired generations of aviators, and reminded everyone that sometimes, against all reason, courage and good engineering make miracles real. The skies over Europe grew quiet, the factories turned to peace, and one Oklahoma boy who'd once dreamed of flight came home to a world forever changed, for the better.